Welcome to the 2024 Traveller Mayday Mayday event. I'm your host, Frank Succardi from CyborgPrime Games. Today I have as a guest, Mr. Matthew Kerwin. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming. Why don't you tell us, introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay, well, I'm relevant to this. I'm a Traveller author, but in my spare time, I do have like a day job, which is not super exciting. I have a family, a wife and a child, and 2 dogs, which I think of as sort of proto-Vargar, like they're pre-uplift Vargar. So for a few years now, I've been writing Traveller fiction after playing the game for many years and not having a specific outlet. I started on that, and I published a Traveller novel in 2021.
Oh, cool. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into role-playing gaming to begin with?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. Someone was just talking to me about this, and we talked about how we got introduced. Traveller was my first RPG. I was, when I was a kid, I had choose your own adventure books, and those were amazing to me. You had different choices in the reader that direct you to multiple different endings. If there's anybody listening who doesn't know what that is, it is possible. But the books would lead you, turn to page whatever, and there would be multiple different endings, and you could sort of play your character in a book. And that same year, my friend had an Atari 800. He would play. He got Zork, and that was again amazing to me that you could do anything you want. Right? Zork wasn't like a video game where it was a text adventure from Infocom, so you just type, light the lamp or go north, go east. It wasn't like any kind of graphical interface. It was just text, but you could use verbs and commands to actually do things in sort of a world of your imagination, right? And the game designer's imagination.
Sure.
And this is a very primitive text adventure by modern standards, but it was a video game by modern standards, but it was something that to me was completely different. Prior to that, video games were like Pac-Man or, Space Invaders or Galaxian or one of those. It was, you're a sprite destroying things and you couldn't make decisions, right? And then somebody put the Traveller book in my hand, and it was one of my mother's friends gave it to me as a Christmas gift. It's like, this is the softcover Traveller book, and I remember where I lived and who I first played it with, and that tells me that was 1984, so that would have been right after my 12th birthday. And I remember I read that book cover to cover, like multiple times cover to cover. It was it was exactly what I wanted in a game world. It was a choose your own adventure book that didn't have the limits of what the author had put down on the pages, and it was a Zork adventure that didn't have the limits of what the programmer had programmed into it. There were no rules. It was a story and a world to explore. Obviously there were rules, but it was a world to explore in any way the player wanted. And I had heard about Dungeons and Dragons at that time. I knew about Dungeons and Dragons. I had never played it. I may have played it 6 or 7 years old. I'm not quite sure, but I had heard of it for sure, and I didn't realize that that's what it was. I thought it was more of a board game. And when I first read the Traveller book, I was just blown away by the possibility of this. So I only had, one friend really at that time when I was 12. I maybe had a couple, but only had one friend who was interested in playing, and I stole the dice out of my Risk game because they were red for many years. I still have those. And I became the referee, and I wrote my first campaign, and it was god awful. It was the worst thing the most annoying railroady crap that you've ever experienced in a game. But I was 12, so
it was your first adventure. It's not going to be good,
right? What do you think is gonna? and then I had a second campaign that was better, and the third one was better, and I got a circle of friends expanding, and I had a real group going. I was always the referee. I could never get anybody else to referee for me until I did meet another friend who eventually picked that up and we could do a little, we could shift and let him be the referee for a little while. I never played in the OTU because I didn't have enough info on the OTU to really, the OTU being the official Traveller universe. I didn't have enough info on that at that time to play in it. I had whatever was in the Traveller book, which was extensive, but not enough to like do anything outside like Regina subsector, right? So I had to design, and you know, way back in the 1980s, for those of your listeners who can remember those ancient times, that you couldn't just order gaming books. You know, you could get them if you went to a gaming store, and you know, if your mom would drive you to the gaming store, and if your mom would give you the money to buy them, and if they had them in stock that day, and I would acquire a book here and there. Like I got 1001 Characters, and that helped a lot. And I got like Prison Planet. I ran that adventure a couple times, but for the most part, you know, there wasn't like the internet where I could just go buy all the books.
Right.
So I created my own universe, my own sector, and then MegaTraveller rolled out. I want to say I was there for the beginning of MegaTraveller, which gosh, do you happen to know what year that was? That would have been 87, I think. I think it was 87, 86 or 87.
Right.
And that rolled out as like 3 books over several months, and I was in absolute, like the first book just blew me away because it was going in a whole different direction, and the rules were different, and looking back, it wasn't that much different, but it was a little different. It was different enough that I was like, I felt like we were in a whole new universe of it. And I kept running MegaTraveller and and that's where I actually started getting into get all the books. I get all the MegaTraveller books, right? I think I do have every one of them they printed. Because I was older by then, I could drive myself to a gaming store. I knew where to look. I could find them used if I needed to.
That's what I did. I went when I could drive. I went to the gaming store and the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, first trip gaming store. Yeah. So then the new era came out, and that was, I want to say 92 or 93, and I didn't like it. I was kind of depressed when GDW closed its doors. Well, first, I guess DGP closed its doors, right? DGP was really doing MegaTraveller at that time. I didn't know that. I didn't understand how those operations worked. But right. DGP closed its doors, and MegaTraveller and GDW kind of closed its doors right around that same time. And they came out with Traveller: The New Era. I guess that is technically a GDW product, isn't it? But I didn't care for it. I didn't care for it much at all. And
how come? What was the rub?
You know, it's hard to say. Maybe it was just I was already curmudgeonly at that point, right? I would have been all of 20 years old or 21 years old, and I was like, you know, why is this changing the entire system? I didn't like. Okay, so there's a lot of things. It doesn't have grav vehicles, which I feel like was part of Traveller, and it doesn't. It had this weird call sign thing going on, right, where everybody had to have a call sign, and that was kind of stupid. And the system rolled 2d10s, was it? I think it was. I want to say it used something similar to the Twilight 2000 system, which was either 1d10 or 2d10s. Anyway, however it worked, I didn't care for it. I didn't like it, so I kept running a MegaTraveller or a MegaTraveller / Classic Traveller kind of blended hybrid through like 5 more campaigns with my friends.
Let's see, MegaTraveller was 86 through 91, okay. And then TNE was 92 through 95.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So anyway, I stuck with MegaTraveller and Classic, and I didn't go back. I didn't expand to TNE, and I kind of didn't even get the rest of those books. And then I ran like several more campaigns, and sometimes I'd be running 2 at the same time, which is kind of crazy. People really wanted to play Traveller at that time in my friend group. And one of the reasons Traveller is important to me is this is where I ended up making many of my friends. Many of my deepest friendships in my life was from gaming, from travel, from getting these original Traveller groups together. These people, stayed my friends until late adulthood. I've lost some of them now. Some of them passed away. Others have moved away. But this was, at that time in my life, not to get maudlin, but it was my real way of making friends, right? I was not a sports guy. I didn't go out drinking. We didn't have, parties. I was the guy who sat at home and wrote science fiction campaigns and ran my friends through them, and that was the nature of our friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that for me is why Traveller became important. And then around like 99, I think, we kind of had shifted into different games. We were doing D&D. Magic the Gathering came out around that time. Everyone kind of backed away from it. And I tuned out of all the Traveller 4 stuff. I think maybe about one book from Traveller 4, and I looked through some of the other things. But I didn't really. I bought the GURPS Traveller line because I liked the way those were done. So I still had interest, but I wasn't playing the game anymore. I was just going a different direction. We were, playing other games. So then I read Agent of the Imperium when I heard that Mark Miller. I heard this late. I missed the Kickstarter, but I happened to randomly look on a Facebook group, I think, and find that Mark Miller had written Agent of the Imperium, and I went and bought it, and it brought me right back into the setting. I discovered the online groups, and then I'd started reading the fiction, and I found out there wasn't much, and then I kind of just started writing fiction for Traveller.
Did you submit articles to the magazines?
Well,
or the zines?
No, because at this point there were zines, but I didn't know about them or didn't know. I could have submitted to Freelance Traveller for sure. I didn't know about that until a little bit later, or that they were interested in publishing fiction. No, I posted these things to Facebook. I posted them on forums and things, like on the COTI forum, and there were a few places where I made reference to these, and this was short fiction that I then later salvaged some of that and put out in a collection of short stories that I'm putting together. But then Mongoose published one of them, which was it's called The Frozen Watch, which was I can't even. I think that was in 2020 that they published that. Mongoose did a brief foray into publishing short fiction at that time, and I just on a whim emailed them and asked them if they were interested in that or any of the other stories I'd written, and that was the only one they were interested in. So they went ahead and published one of them, and I was just doing this for fun, right? I wasn't thinking it was ever going to get published, so but I was continuing to write. So I wrote a full Traveller novel that was not very good, so it's probably never going to see the light of day.
Well, Frozen Watch has 4.5 stars on DriveThru RPG, and it's a silver bestseller.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. I never really paid close attention to how it was doing. It was
last update was 2019.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't 20. It was probably published in 2019. It was, The Frozen Watch is a very short story that is almost a pie onto math. It's all about a character who later starred in the novel I did publish. But it's all about a character who is stuck. It makes an unintended EVA, right, from her small craft. She is outside floating over a planet. She doesn't know what planet it is. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know how she got there because she was just revived from the Frozen Watch. And the story is about her attempts to survive and to land safely on this planet below her. I like to think it's also about her life and what she'd done up to that point and how she hadn't been really living her life. She was stuck in a box, frozen, at the behest of the Imperium, but she kind of intentionally did that to avoid living her life. And, the Frozen Watch is therefore an allegory for the way she was living. So that was that. It got me, again, attention, and people were happy to read it. I got a lot of good commentary on it from people.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had gone on and written these novels. And the first one I showed to some friends, and they read it, and they're like, this doesn't make any sense. I still have that, and I don't know. It's something I keep thinking about going back and playing with again. But in the process of continuing kind of thinking what I was going to write about or do next, I just started writing the work that eventually became the Wagner Incident.
Where do you, how do you generate ideas from them? Do they just come to you like when you're at the store or something, or you just, do you sit down and kind of brainstorm ideas? You have an idea that popped in your head somehow and you want to kind of explore that, or what's your creative process?
Yeah, I can't explain it. And I think this is something I always kind of wanted to write. And I did write other things before this. I'd written a couple of fantasy novels that are very D&D related back when I was playing a lot of D&D, 99, 98, 2000. And it's hard to say where, I think any writer has trouble saying where ideas come from. Stephen King talks about this in one of his books, one of his nonfiction books, about how is there some like extra normal, so I always say not quite paranormal, but extra normal entity that feeds these things to us. And I think he sort of plays that up a little bit. I would not say I'm Stephen King, so I don't think I have one of those. I think I'm
like a weird like ethereal muse or something,
right? Or ethereal muse, or a little demon sitting on my shoulder, reciting these things to me. No, I just, and sometimes the idea goes in very different directions than I think it will. And if you ever sit down and you write fiction, if you're a good fiction has characters that sort of take over the narrative. Mm-hmm. And you think, I'm going to write a book about this, and you get all done and you look at it and you're like, wow, I wrote a book about something else entirely. But yeah,
go on.
No, I said with the Traveller ones particularly, I was interested in writing something about each one of the careers, each one of the Traveller careers. So like in classic Traveller, there's Navy, Marines, Army, Scouts, Merchants, and other, right? Everyone remembers those from classic Traveller. So sure. I was going to sit down and I was going to write a short story about each one of those things. So I started out writing an Army story, and my players sidetracked me into writing a novel that's really more about Marines than Army. But that's what you get sometimes.
Would you say you're when it comes to sitting down and writing, are you more a structured writer, or would you say you're more of a seat of the pants?
I'm structured for sure. Mm-hmm. I sit down and I figure out these are my plot points A, B, C. This is where I want to hit plot point A. This is where I'm B and C. And then I say, okay, so I'm going to need maybe 5 chapters here for A and 7 chapters for B and 4 chapters for C. And then this is the Traveller part of it, is I do a lot of science-y research on these things. I am not like with the Frozen Watch, I sat down and did a lot of math on things like orbital velocity and dynamics and temperatures and re-entry temperatures and atmospheric pressures, and I am not a scientist by any means. I just have to research all that myself, look it up. And Traveller as a game covers a lot of that for you. It's super useful when you're playing in an RPG. It doesn't necessarily give you the kind of detail to write about fiction for it. So it's that part of it tends to take me a while to figure out exactly what I'm doing. And for the Wagner Incident, I did a lot of research on things like in Traveller, like how do grav vehicles operate in all the different versions of Traveller, right? And how does at one point a character gets a grav belt? It's like, how do grav belts operate in every version of Traveller? It's been different every single one, right? And what kind of artillery pieces do they use? And how do they fight wars? And then the Droyne are very important in the Wagner Incident. And I did a lot of research and deep dives into the Droyne in the different book settings that have been written and the way the Marines operate in the different ones. And so that part of it, the research is usually done after setting up the general idea of the story, and then the structure of the story. I do the research and then I write it, entirely from beginning to end. I don't know if every author does this, but I find that most of them do. I end up writing the book twice. I end up writing it and I go back and read it and it's terrible. And then I rewrite it to be better the second time. So some I think do two rewrites. I think I read I want to say it's Piers Anthony wrote the Incarnations of Mortality series, and those have very extensive afterwards in them. And he talks about his process, and he was saying he rewrites everything twice. I don't think most authors do that, but that's how I discovered that was a thing to do, is to rewrite the whole story from beginning to end. Because after you get through the first time, you're like, oh, I left that question of who that person was dangling. I never really explained why this guy's here. I left a clue that this guy was coming back and he never came back. I mean, so you realize when you read through it, hey, I left a lot of stuff hanging out there.
Yeah. I didn't learn that lesson through literature class or whatever. I learned it by accidentally deleting something, or losing something I worked on a lot, and then I ended up and I was so pissed, and I just wanted to not even ever do it again. But when I rebuilt it the second time, it was exponentially better than the first one.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I should destroy all my stuff and rewrite it.
That happened.
Rebuild it.
That happened to me when refereeing Traveller too. I had written my own Traveller universe, right? I had my own sector. I had a lot of detail, maps of every world, drawn on paper. And then I had several, by the time I had a computer, probably late 80s, I had several adventures and things written in the computer. Mm-hmm. And on my drive in Microsoft Word 4.0 format, probably, or 3.0 format, and I lost that drive. And I had a backup for that drive, but it was floppy disks, and the floppy disks didn't work, and I basically lost my campaign, and that was kind of devastating to me, because I had a lot of work into that, and it was just gone, and it was so
painful. Yeah,
I think I even took my drive to a tech expert, and he got some of it back. So I still have snippets of things that I wrote for that campaign, in the late 80s. I lost a fairly extensive D&D campaign at the same time too, which is actually what I was at that time I was playing, and so that the campaign ended. I'm like, I lost my my notes and my adventure and everything, and we never went back to that. But one of the things I tell people when they're writing is just use Dropbox. Fine. I use Dropbox. Other people use Google Docs, whatever you got.
I use Google Drive, because it keeps versions as well.
Yeah. I mean, and that problem's that problem, right? That whole big problem has sort of been solved now, and there's really not an excuse to lose anything anymore.
Yeah. There's two big storage companies for folks who are listening, or three. I mean, there's Dropbox. There's also Mega, and there's also Google, and they give you various amounts of free starting stuff. I managed to somehow get 3 times the amount I don't know how I did it. Maybe I got in on a promotion or something, but
Yeah.
I've been putting all my stuff over on Mega, and then Google gave me like a really good deal to like go up to 100 gigs. It was
wow.
like, do it for half price for 6 months, and then it's only $1.20 a month or something. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And so I'm slowly migrating back over to the Google platform.
I was
And then
using some
using
other
Mega
service.
for my archives.
I was using some other service. I can't remember the name of it, and then it went out of business. And Dropbox offered me something to switch to them,
Mhm.
and I did, and I pay them. Gosh, I want to say $100 a year. It's not an outrageous amount of money, but it is absolute peace of mind as fact, and for things like because I spend a lot of time curating what I've written, right? So I can't be like losing that.
right. Do they have like a folder synchronizer or something, so it
Yes.
just like appears as a drive or a folder on your computer?
Yeah, I in fact I set it as my I can't tell you how I did it at this point, I've forgotten, but I set it as my documents folder. So my documents folder is just automatically backed up to the the Windows folder that has the documents automatically backed up to Dropbox.
My documents. Mm-hmm.
I can get it from anywhere, and I can I have all my I even have like all my Mongoose PDFs in there and everything that I purchased, and the PDFs of the classic Traveller stuff that I bought from Mark. Mark sells those. Mark Miller sells those on his website.
Right.
So you can buy them, and I think he sends you a CD. He might send you a USB drive now, but either way, I copied them all into there, so that's backed up too. I can't. My house burns down, and I still am not going to lose my writing, and that's important to me, and that's something I'm willing to pay money for at this stage of my life, right? Because I probably can't. I don't have time to write all that again.
Yeah. People tell me all the time, "Oh, I've got it on a USB drive." I was like, "But when your house burns down,
right? Yeah, or you get robbed and they steal, your USB drive, right? I don't know how that's going to happen, or your dog eats it, or
right,
whatever. It's just I used to keep
this just die.
I used to keep this stuff on zip disks, and I found some zip disks the other day. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with these?
Yeah, that's funny.
But that was that was its own era.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
Yeah. So let's talk about since we're kind of on the Wagner incident. Do you want to tell us anything interesting that you learned about the Droyne?
Boy, there's so many things I learned about the Droyne that I would not say I'm the preeminent Droyne expert, but I certainly do know a lot about them. I've definitely read every single thing there is to read about them. Let's
say I'm like Joe Schmo off the street. I've never heard of Traveller or whatever, and you got to tell me who the Droyne are and what's cool about them.
The Droyne are a species that's so ancient that nobody knows where they came from or how they got to be where they are, and they have they're divided up into 6 physical different forms. So humans have genders. The Droyne technically have genders too, but a more important division for them is their caste. They have 6 castes, and here's the fact that maybe people don't all know. They didn't used to have 6 castes. They used to have more or fewer castes than that. There have been some castes that have gone extinct, and there have been some that merge into others. They have a very conservative upbringing in that they are more dedicated to the group and the family, specifically their individual family unit, which is usually at least one of each cast member plus some extras. That's what they call their Tiafel. That's their individual family. And if they put their own needs above the needs of their Tiafel, to the extent that if the family no longer needs them, and there's no other family that will conveniently take them, which they will change families if they have to, but if there's no other family that will take them, they just kill themselves. They just sit down and they quietly die. If they're not stimulated,
they can kill themselves by force of will.
just by their force of
or
will,
just
right? And
from detachment from the family unit.
right, or if their
Okay.
leader, who's one of the casts, tells them that they're no longer needed, they're redundant, they simply go sit in the corner until they die. And they try not to do that. Of course, they try to find another place for them for their excess members, but that when someone's past the point of retirement or whatever, they don't have a retirement plan. They just die. That's just it. But some of them, some small number of them, and this was probably written into the original classic behind the scenes. This was probably written into the original classic Traveller Droyne to give player characters a reason to play a Droyne, right? Because otherwise, it's going to be like pretty boring, right? You're doing whatever your job is to do, and you do whatever the leader says, and when the leader's done with you, you die. Well, that's not a very interesting character, but there's a certain number of Droyne that can sort of decide to, on their own, just, well, I'm going to leave the community, right? Leave my family, leave my community, and I'm going to go off on my own and just live as an outcast. And there's like these outcasts kind of form new communities together, and they can keep themselves going that way without dying. And this gives an opportunity for storytelling for player characters, or for somebody who wants to write fiction about Droid, where they do something interesting. Is that there's outcasts, and they call these outcasts the deathless. They're people who, and they're sort of,
are these people who like were supposed to commit suicide but they didn't, and
they were instructed to, or by all reasonable means they should have killed themselves, and they didn't do it.
Self-preservation or whatever,
Yeah, they found some other reason. Yeah, they found some other reason, someone else to work for, some other family to join, and they didn't do it. And they're sort of treated with scorn, but also a little bit of fear. And there's no. I looked for an analogy with humans where I could explain it a little better, and there really.
It'd be like a disgraced samurai who was supposed to, do
seppuku,
but didn't, or something, or
right, and that's a little bit. Even that's a little bit alien to Western society to fully understand what that means, right? If you're Japanese,
you're
maybe
honor
you understand.
Killing yourself, basically.
Yeah. It's an honor killing, or the only other thing I can think of is they're lost my train of thought there for a second. Sorry, you can edit this part out where I'm thinking stumbling what I say.
Yeah, seppuku and.
There's not like something like that in Western society, except for maybe like soldiers who are deserters or something, right? And even that's not quite right. We don't consider them. The Droyne don't consider them honorable that they stayed alive. They just consider them to be outcasts. And the Droyne family that is central to the Wagner Incident is a family of these deathless outcasts who were driven out of their community.
Here's a question about Droyne. You mentioned that they have 6 casts.
Right.
Do the casts determine their physiology?
They do, and they determine their not only their physiology, but their job and their destiny in life. And they
which comes first, the cast or the physiology?
They come together. So when a Droyne child, Droyne are all kind of look about the same until they're a certain age, and I want to say it's about 6 standard years, or maybe it's 8 standard years. I can't remember exactly. They have a ceremony, and they have a mystical ceremony that involves the coins, which the Droyne coins are a favorite Traveller item. If you haven't picked up a copy, Cheese Weasel is selling them for a little bag of coins. It's totally worth the money if you're into this, because they're a lot of fun to play with. That was a little plug for Cheese Weasel. Now available.
I'll put a link.
Available. Please put a link. Yeah,
I have a Target friend in mind for a Christmas gift.
I told him we'd spend 30 seconds on this, so we have a few more. No, but they consult these coins, and they come back and they say, this person should be this caste, and then that person starts to gradually turn into that caste, and it's irrevocable. So once they've realized,
once the council has spoken.
once they've picked their coins and the council has spoken or however that system works, they start having physiological changes. I think of those, if we're going to go really nerdy here, I consider that to be an epigenetic change that takes place and activates and deactivates certain chromosomes, because they also are changing their gender. So the immature droid is not male nor female nor their third gender, which is an enabler. What T5 calls an enabler. It is it's neither. The child is none of those. The child gradually changes.
The child is genderless.
Okay. And then but has all the chromosomes to be any of the three genders, and then epigenetic changes take place as a result of the ceremony somehow that pushes that brings their different chromosomes out.
I see.
And I think of that. That's how I think it works. And this is not groundbreaking, because there are animals on Earth like this. Effectively, it could be either gender at birth and convert one way or another, or at hatching, right?
Like
bees
frogs,
are like this, ants are like this, frogs can be like that. Frogs can change their gender, as famous from Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs can also apparently change their gender, as is in that covered by that documentary.
Plants can do it too. Mm-hmm.
Plants can do it. Plants do it as well. And there's a certain there's certain changes that take place, but they're not using mystical coins to do it. But you look at bees, and they're using something that's no less confusing, right? But they somehow figure out what gender each person's going to be, even though they came out of the same egg and they were all the same. It's like you fed this one this, and now it turned into that. So just because humans control their sexes with an X and a Y chromosome doesn't mean that that's how the Droyne do it, or how
everybody has to do it.
Right. We want it done this only. That's the only correct way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how the Droyne operates. So that one of the things that's super interesting about the Droyne is that they have a technician caste. So one of their castes, which is clearly part of their evolutionary process, is a technician. So that means that they've had a technician caste, probably 1 million years, which means they had technology like maybe 1 million years ago. And that makes people wonder about the Droyne, like, is there something, we're not seeing here?
Are there like archaeological finds that show like, how like sometimes when you're playing Traveller, there's always like these, you're always looking for like ancient artifacts and digs, but I've never been looking for things of like Droyne origin that
Well, funny you should mention that. This is one of the plot points of the Wagner Incident, is that there is an ancient site on the same world with these Droyne who and over the course of the novel, the characters come to discover that there used to be Droyne living at that site, and that means that the ancients moved humans around in the distant past, and they moved Varga around in the distant past, and they apparently moved Droyne around in the distant past. But longtime Traveller listeners, probably every one of your listeners is aware that the Droyne used to be the ancients, and they operated in that mode for 2,000 to 5,000 years, back about 300,000 years before the game, before the present setting of the game.
So if that's what I was going to say. If if Droyne technicians have been around for millions of years, that means the technology has been around for millions of years. And so where's the evidence of that technology?
That's a great question, but no one knows where the Droyne homeworld is, so it would be there most likely.
Gotcha.
And I think that's one of the mysteries. That's certainly one of the mysteries about the Droyne, is that their homeworld's missing.
What do you think happened to it?
I kind of think it was that at the end of the ancient period, or somewhere during the ancient period, they moved their homeworld somewhere safer. because there was a war going on among the ancients, and I think they had the technology and the capability to move their homeworld another place.
All right, that sounds good.
Or they blew it up. Hard to say.
Yeah, either that or blown up.
Yeah. So I had written this novel, right, which involving Droyne and things, and so this is very much a OTU novel, right? I've got the Imperium and the Marines and the Imperial Marines and the Droyne, and this is very much outside of my ability to publish it, because the OTU really belongs to Mark, and it belongs to Mark Miller as the creator of Traveller.
Right.
So that meant that if I was going to publish this, so my first thing that I did is I emailed Mark and asked him if he wanted to publish a novel, and it took me about 5 minutes to find his email address, and 6 months to get up the courage to actually email him and ask. And finally, and he said, "No, I'm not going to publish any fiction." Basically, he just said he wasn't interested. And I had talked with some other people in the community online who are friends of mine, because by that point I'd made some friends in the Facebook group and the Traveller Wiki, and I kind of talked to them, and they sort of imply, well, he might let you self-publish it. And I went and I said, well, all right, maybe I'll ask him if he'll let me do that. So I wrote him and I asked him if I could self-publish the novel, and he didn't answer. So I wrote him again about 3 or 4 months later, and I was like, hey, I didn't hear back from you. And we started a correspondence about it, and he's very busy. He was apologized from not responding to me last time. He was very busy. He wanted me to talk to him about what I was writing and what it was. I think he needed to make sure I wasn't just putting out some kind of garbage or something that was going to make things look worse, but make his brand or make the OTU look bad. And ultimately we came to terms on giving me permission to publish, to self-publish the novel.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Guy is very approachable and super nice.
Yeah, he definitely is. And he was very helpful with suggesting like an editor. And he'd suggested, I know that I believe he has not read the book. I do know that he passed it on to a friend of his who's also a friend of mine, and asked him to read it. And they must have given a favorable review because he was okay with me publishing it. We discussed the different terms and things I could talk about and not talk about, and what he wanted to review before I actually published it. And when I did, he was very he congratulated me. It was a very good feeling that I got that he I was welcome to do that, in other words. So I published that. That was April of 2021 when I finally put everything together. And at that point I had gotten cover art done, some really great cover art that I got from an artist who worked on the CCG.
Mm.
And it was recommended to me by a friend who he said, I really love this guy's work. And so I emailed him, found him online, corresponded with him and commissioned the cover. And a really good editor who was recommended by another friend of mine. And after getting the permission from Mark, that part of it, the editing and the cover, that took several months, and then I finally put it out when I was ready to go. And I really kind of thought I would stop there. I didn't think I was going to write or publish anything more, at least in the Traveller realm. But I've continued working on these the short stories, and I had.
Did you say you have an anthology in the works, or?
Right, yeah, it's technically a collection. I found out, though I thought the same as you, an anthology has to be multiple authors, and so I had written technically, they say, I had written at least one of the short stories was somebody else online was going to do an anthology, and I was going to send it to him, but he never did it, and so I had sold one to Mongoose, so I wanted to kind of have 6, and so I put together another one or 2, and actually there's actually 7 in the volume, although my title at this time is Tales of Travelers, 6 Stories from Charted Space. 6 Stories from Charted Space would be the subtitle, even though there's 7, because that way I feel like it's like a baker's dozen, right? So like it's the title is 6 Stories from Charted Space. If if there's 7 stories and you don't like one of them, you still got 6, right? Like, so if you think one of them was crap, which it probably was, I still gave you 6, so you can't argue with it. So I talked to Mark about republishing those in the same terms, and we're still kind of talking about that. But I think that's probably going to happen here, one way or another.
That'd be great. I always liked collections and anthologies. Just because it's they're easy to get in and out of, and you get a short, complete story. And then, like with anthologies, you get a selection of like different authors, and like I read like one that was all about like different kinds of stories about powered armor, or different kinds of stories about like ogres and bolos, all collected into an anthology by different authors. So,
wow,
yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, I that's one of the things I really do like about anthologies is you get a different style. Unfortunately, with a collection all written by me, you just get me 6 times.
But you get a collection of stories, so that's good. Like I had to do jury duty, so I brought like a Heinlein collection. And just read a bunch of Heinlein short stories while I was waiting for stuff to happen. Jury selection.
Some of those are really good, and some of those are some of the Highland stuff is a little dated.
Well, it's kind of like Star Trek or whatever your favorite TV or whatever your favorite series is. They're not all good. They don't hit them out of the park on every one. And sometimes you're like, oh, that was dopey. Wesley stepped on a flower and now he must die.
Yeah. So some of them hold up a lot better than others, right? The world
adventure, the encounter at Farpoint, it looks like some like shoestrings, and at the end it's pretty terrible.
There's the blatantly racist one on the jungle planet, and there's the there's a lot of them there that but then the old series was the same way. There were some that were just watching a log and grow moss, and then there were some that were but I think that's what funny you bring that up. One of my goals is to write science fiction that is one of the things that science fiction does is it lets you write about our world and real problems without causing in ways that that hopefully don't sound preachy but make people think. So look at Star Trek. You got a guy's white on one side and black on the other, and the other guy's black on one side and white on the other, and they could tell that story. I don't see any difference in you guys, and they could tell that story, and people could watch that story and not freak out, right? That they were talking about, how dare they talk about that, right? And this is we're maybe a year or so out of segregation, if at all, at that point. So it makes they're making a social commentary, and some science fiction doesn't have that, and I question whether that's really science fiction.
I'm with you on that, because I always feel like they take like a social ill, and then they go, what if this was taken to an extreme?
Yeah.
What if the Nazis took over or won the war, or what if gangsters took over and it was gangster world, or whatever.
And that's not I hadn't really thought about what the Gangster Planet one is trying to say, but there's probably a deeper message there that I haven't picked up. Although maybe there wasn't. They just needed to get another show out that week, right?
Maybe it was just about letting organized crime go out of control, or being
careful how you deal with with primitives, right? Be careful how you deal with what we call primitives, or when you're dealing with that's where they introduce the idea of the prime directive.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say a contamination of the prime directive like story.
Right, and maybe that means don't mess with other cultures, or don't try to force your way onto other cultures because you don't know how that's going to work out.
Right.
But I try to do that when I'm writing, and I think I try to bring theme into it, in other words, which is not to say that you have to have that for traveler fiction. I think and it doesn't always have to be, preachy. It doesn't always have to be, his people are black on the left side kind of problems, right? It can be subtle. It can be something that's not the end of our. It doesn't have to be the collapse of our society or one of the failings of our society that is writ large. It can just be something that some part of human nature that you explore. And one of the things about writing a collection of short stories is I had these stories kind of written, and I wrote a couple more, and then I wrote a couple more, and then I threw out some of the ones I had. So what I ended up with is kind of a curated set of. It runs the reader through a series of moods, right? So the first one is a little funny, and the second one's a little scary, and the third one's a little dark, and the fourth one's even darker, and it's basically comes back out the other side. They should feel like they went through a little bit of tunnel of darkness there, and you can write. They're all science fiction because they're all traveler, but they're also, one of them is comedy, and one of them is pretty much just body horror, and one of them is a sort of a corporate type of horror, and another one's an adventure, and so as the author, I get to write all these different kinds of stories and wrap them all up into one book and sell that book, right?
Yeah. Hopefully. Well, best of luck on that. That sounds like a great endeavor.
Yeah. So that would be, hopefully, if everything works out right, that'll be coming out soon. And then after that, if allowed to or able to, I would like to write I'm all right. Well, I've already been working on a sequel to Wagner.
Oh, cool. So, you seem like super creative to me, and you're happen to be friends with Ambassador Tallyrand.
Yeah, good old Tallyrand. I don't know why I suggested that. I that just hit me one day. I had been writing. I wrote one of the short stories in this series called The Associates, and I just sort of finished that. And that one ends with the spoiler alert. That one ends with a conversation with a Hiver. And I thought about writing Hiver. Like, what is, we talk about the Hivers in the role playing game, and if you're a longtime Traveller player, you've probably read the Hiver modules or read something about them, right? And there's a fiction series that's actually, so there is a little bit other. I am not the first person to write a Traveller novel. There's been a few of them. There's one there's a series of TNE novels that start with the Death of Wisdom, that involve the Hivers and the way the Hivers interact with people. But I think that's the only one where you see them. In an RPG, it can explain, well, this is what Hivers are like. When you actually have to write it, how does the Hiver talk? How does the Hiver interact with people? And what I landed on for the short story is they're really gross. I mean, they're just grosser than the grossest thing you can. You're having a conversation with something that's, eating, pooping, and having babies at the same hole while it's talking to you, right? I can't explain how disgusting it is, except I try. But I asked Rob Eaglestone, who's a friend of mine on and somebody else who's worked on a lot of Traveller stuff. I said, how do I depict a conversation with a Hiver? And he said, let me see. I'm gonna actually look this up. You cut this part out where I'm actually looking it up. But okay, here's how he put it. He says, "What I think of Hivers I think of Sheldon Cooper with a powerful grasp of psychology, utterly frustrating. And that, when I heard that, that nailed the personality for me. And I don't think they all have the same personality, but I think that Tallyrand is definitely, Sheldon Cooper with the grasp of psychology. He's a lot smarter than you are, and he wants to tell you that. He wants to make sure you understand that. It's not your fault that you're dumb.
Right.
Just so that we're all clear, there's a lot of dumb people in the universe, a lot of dumb critters in the universe. The Hivers are here to fix as much of that as they can, and it's not in any way your fault.
Right.
And we wouldn't want you to feel like it's your fault or you're any way lesser because of that. You're just, we'll fix everything for you. We'll make this work for you, and you don't have to worry. If your race survives the next few years, which is not at all certain, because you are frankly very, very dumb. You're not. It's amazing you've gotten this far,
mm-hmm.
And you're not. That's nothing against you, because we're not, gods or anything. But we practically
you can't
are.
help it. It's just your nature to be dumb.
Right. It's your nature. Absolutely, your nature to be dumb, and I'm
here to tell you about it.
I just need to let you know that there's better ways to do things, and we can show you how to do those things, and we can. And if there's something that's broken, we can fix it. That's all. We can run your life better than you're running your life right now.
So we gave you the idea to make a little back and forth play like that.
Well, I was kind of thinking that that was something interesting or different you could do. That this was a platform where so I had thought about, this is one of those crazy fantasies you get that you can never do, right? I thought about, wouldn't it be cool to go to to TravellerCon or something, which I've never made it to TravellerCon. Mostly because it's the other side of the country. I live in Phoenix, so it is in Pennsylvania, and it is woof woof. Sorry,
it's all right.
The Varger are chirping.
That's okay.
It's in Pennsylvania, the other side of the country, and it's not even convenient once you get to Pennsylvania. So I haven't been able to go. And my family
I'm with you, man. I live in Santa Fe.
Yeah, my family, not surprisingly, is not into Traveller. So they're like, I'm like, hey, you guys want to go to Philly and hang out while I go about 10 to 25 miles west of Philly to hang out with some other people? And they're like, no. So I'd be pretty much going on vacation by myself, and that's awkward to bring up in your marriage. Like, hey, I'm going to go on my own vacation. That's weird. So I haven't gone, but I was thinking, it would be awesome to
it's a
cosplay.
Business conference. Go on.
it would be fun to cosplay at a Traveller con. Because I dabbled in cosplay a little bit. I have like if you're friends with me on Facebook, you've seen my
Harrington, or do you? Oh no, I saw you have like SCA.
Yeah, it's not SCA. I'm not in the SCA. I would never actually take that kind of level of commitment. I am very lazy. But I have a hospitaler outfit that I wear to those kinds of events. So I thought it would be kind of fun to cosplay as like a Volani Noble or something, right? And then I looked, and that's basically cross-dressing. I looked at the how Volani Noble's dressed, and it's like I'm not making it out of the train station.
Those pants are too fancy.
I'm not making it out of the Philadelphia train station without getting beat up. No, maybe I don't mean anything negative about Philadelphia when I say that. They're if it was Pittsburgh, I certainly wouldn't make it out of the train station. But basically, it was like, well, this is high heels and giant hats, and so I thought, well, that would be like a Varger cosplay would be too weird, and an Aslan cosplay, it kind of looks like everyone's already doing that, because most of the people at TravellerCon seem to have full beards, and it really looks like a Faterla convention. But I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to be a Hiver. Like, how would you do a Hiver cosplay? And I it's just outside of the realm of possibility for me to do that. But then I was thinking, well, the way to do it would be like, a puppetry, something like that.
Yeah,
but
that's
that's how you could do
like,
it.
are you familiar with the German acting troupe called Mummenschanz?
No.
They do these like body puppetry things where they put themselves in like convoluted tubing, like a Hiver look, and then they scuttle around and they put up one arm and another arm, and you're not sure which one's the head and like where's the arm. And
I kind of did think about that, but you know what? I am not limber, so that was not going to work. So what I ultimately decided on was what I really need is somebody to, you know, I could do like a video presentation of a Hiver, and then when you were talking about, you know, your Mayday thing, I was like, well, that's an audio presentation on Hiver, and that kind of works best because there's plenty of right. They have to talk through a voter anyway, right? So you never actually hear a Hiver's voice because they don't have a voice. They don't have a voice box. In many ways, their bodies are too primitive to have a voice box. So don't
let them hear you say that.
It's just that's the irony of the Hiver, right? Is that they're almost a lesser life form. Like they shouldn't be intelligent. They're you know, they only have one bodily orifice, and we evolved away from that, you know, 2 billion years ago. And here they're, you know, supposedly smarter than we are. But then I knew that there were online repository or online voice to speech options, and so I explored those a little bit. And after talking with you, and yeah, I just thought it was. And Tallyrand is. I had just listened to a very lengthy podcast on the French Revolution, and Tallyrand's character. I'd heard of him, but I didn't really know the details of Tallyrand. And he is, if you ever look into that dude was a character. He was the absolute most, the smartest and yet the most cynical person that has probably ever lived. It's very hard for me to express how he managed to save himself during the French Revolution, where everybody else got their head cut off. He's the one person who walked away, you know, made it all the way through to Napoleon with his head still attached to his body. And he was, I think of him as, and I don't know, but I think of him as having the same level of arrogance and superiority that the Hivers have. Mm-hmm. So that's why choosing that name seemed right to me, because Tallyrand was technically the foreign minister or whatever he was called at the time for revolutionary France, but also, you know, probably either the best diplomat or the worst diplomat that ever lived, depending on your perspective. So that's why I picked the name. And then you know, Tallyrand, ultimately I guess Tallyrand was a manipulator. That's how I would put it. He manipulated everyone around him in the real world, right? And so the Hiver being called Tallyrand just worked out perfectly.
Right. How did you come up with the idea for the dialogue and what you would talk about?
Well, I mean, you gave me a list of questions, right? You gave me a list of possible questions and things to start with, and I kind of brought up a few other things that I thought he'd like to talk about. And then I just kind of let myself flow through the character and just what he would say about, you know, he would go off the questions of the commentary to push his own agenda, which is essentially that you're very inferior, and he's sorry about that, but they could really find a better way to do things than you're doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Points out that, you know, we discovered jump drives while you were still in the middle of the Roman Republic, and but don't worry about that. Doesn't make you stupid. We just, you know, different races figure these things out at different times, and you know, you have an uncontrolled divergence of balkanization in your society, but don't worry about those things. You know, that's just part of your culture, and
you can't help it.
You can't help it, and this is a genetic trait common to the Terrigens, because you see that in both human and Vargar space. And you know, we don't have that because we always cooperate, and we always have cooperated. There's never been a war between the Hivers and among the Hivers. And it's just everything's great. You're we're super happy to know you, kind of thing.
It's cool to be able to get into that and like look up the lore that exists and kind of like add to it, and I think that was super cool of you to do that. It's cool that I've met a lot of really creative people doing this Mayday thing, so I'm super thankful for that.
And this is part of that same outlet, right? If you read through the Tallyrand stuff, he's saying things that are pretty outrageously outrageously offensive, right? Like directly, like, you people are stupid. But he's also kind of pointing out a few little details, like, hey, we fight about, you humans fight about really stupid things.
Right.
Like, you guys are fighting over religion, and you guys it doesn't really make any sense that you guys are facts. You're fixated on economics,
right? Or fighting over territory.
You're fixated on economics when you're disregarding what makes you have what's positive or right. You're artificially restricting your production. You're creating scarcity to keep your money. You're more interested in the money than the defeating or getting rid of the scarcity that's causing the need for the money, right? So he is pointing out several things that are that's reasonable commentary on a reasonable message to give to humans as to what we're doing wrong. And it's just couched in the sense of being delivered by this incredible jerk from another alien society. But if you read through it, he kind of makes some good points.
He just comes across as a space jerk.
He comes across as a space jerk, and he is a space jerk. He's an absolutely egotistical maniac, but he's trying to be helpful. He hangs a lampshade in a couple of things, that humans maybe could be doing better. That I would never say, of course, that we should stop fighting wars about religion, because that would be me preaching to you, right? I'm not going to preach to you that we should stop fighting wars about religion. I personally think, that's up to you. If you want to fight a war about religion, that's your choice. But Tallyrand seems to think we shouldn't.
Good point. Yeah, that's I like that tradition of staying or kind of having those like, not moral lessons, but like I don't this one, like, the original Star Trek, where they're taking the space hippies to the space Eden, and when they finally get there, they all run out barefoot, and then like, oh god, it burns, and it's like, and
if you read through, that's got works on two levels, right? Because that's a during, that was during Vietnam, right? So like, the hippies are going to lead us to this paradise. Oh crap, this paradise is going to kill us. Now we need the military industrial complex to rescue us from this paradise, right?
Right.
and it's working on two levels. First of all, it's pointing out this hippie situation, and then it's pointing out that, well, maybe you better not let everything go hippie, right? Or you'll be stuck with.
And then, poison, you get the crazy. I love the crazy turnabout endings. Those are my favorite. Like the remake of of Outer Limits.
Yes.
I love that series. It's just like, you think something's happening, and then the last scene, it's not what you thought was going on at all.
Yes, the Twilight Zone, very much favorite there too. And those are classic science fiction short stories. Many of them were adapted from science fiction short stories too. And they sometimes, at the adaptation, they file the serial numbers off of them, but they're semi-famous sci-fi, because there was a lot of pulp sci-fi being written back then, and they would just steal the plot sometimes with some of those.
Stuff out the slush pile.
Or maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe it was just there's only so many ideas that they're going to start to resemble each other after a while.
Right. Yeah. The old Monkey Island theory.
Eventually you're going to come up with the same. I mean, there's, like, everybody puts on a mask and that makes everybody ugly, or the world where everybody's ugly and the one beautiful person thinks she's ugly, or they think she's, that's right there in your head, right?
Or
The
the guy
ironic
who's gonna
endings.
who wishes, you know, he would like nothing more than to read all the books and be left alone,
Yes.
and then he is left alone, and then he tries to read the books, but he breaks his glasses.
And
You
he's
know?
the only one left. He's
Yeah,
the
and
only
he's the only
person
one
left in the
left.
world. Yeah. Yeah. And there's been, you know, plenty of those. And there, those short sci-fi anthology series have come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're going to see them again. I think we kind of do. Like Black Mirror is kind of doing that.
Yeah, Black Mirror. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's still in production
Yeah,
or not.
the
I think I'm a
Dimension
season
404
behind.
was pretty good while it lasted.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with that one.
Yeah,
Dimension 404.
Yeah, check it out. It's like it's like there's one where Justin Bieber is a clone, and like the whole society is Justin Bieber's.
And see, that's where you start to get to. That's almost making a commentary too, isn't it? Like, do we always want to be Justin Bieber? Like, what if that's the opportunity? What if you had the choice tomorrow? Would you want to be Justin Bieber instead of you? And like, you know, a substantial portion of the population is going to be Justin Bieber tomorrow, if that's the option. Right.
And those are other like shows that kind of have, you know, the moral of the story thing, because like on Black Mirror, there was one where you go around and you likes and dislikes are like currency.
Yes.
And you know, if you're like, I'd like my, you know, the thing that I'm owed from the store, and then you piss off the clerk, so they give you a thumbs down, and now you're like, you know, now I can't do something, you know, I can't buy a sandwich or whatever.
And see, that was similarly dealt with on an episode of The Orville, where they come to the Orville's very much in the vein of Star Trek, if not clearly, again, filed off the serial numbers on that one. And that's the same thing. They go to a planet and there's basically like, you know, you start getting thumbs up and thumbs down. And if the thumbs downs get bad enough, you know, they execute you.
Right.
It's not stepping on the flowers, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well,
no, he's dancing, he's climbing on a statue or something.
Right. Yeah. He did something where he climbed on a statue and it was kind of rude or whatever. And everyone thinks that's rude. And so they start giving him thumbs down, and next thing they're going to execute him. Right. So it's the same idea. And that's, you know, it's very hard for somebody who reads that, who doesn't see the connection to the real world with that.
Right.
And the Orville did a lot with, you know, gender and what it means to be gay and what it means, you know, when they have the one race that everybody's male, right? That's kind of a shock right there. Like, okay, so, you know, at that point, being gay is the norm, right? Because that's all there is. They're all men. But then they turn that on its ear when they're like, oh, but occasionally there's a female born. But they quickly cover that up and you know, they do an operation and turn him into a male because they can't have that. They can't have that gender expression anymore. You know, it's a similar kind of idea of what extent do we have, or to what extent can we push our beliefs and our agenda on our children, right?
Right. Without their consent.
Without their consent, without their future consent, without any kind of understanding that they can fix this later, or they should fix this later, or they, you know, if they don't like it, they can go back. None of that is, you know, all that gets played out in the Orville, in those Orville episodes. I really hope they bring that show back.
Well, you know, it's another one of those things. Like, what's you know, imagine this situation where, you know, everybody, it seems like everybody's just doing stuff online for likes. Imagine if that was like really taken out to an extreme or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So what if you could only have whatever the limit on TikTok was, you know, 60 seconds or whatever? What if you could only have conversations that lasted no longer than 60 seconds, right? What would that do to society? Like, what if that's the new norm? That's the new world.
Right. Yeah. Like there's overpopulation and you just don't have time to interact with people. So you step up to the, you know, to do something complicated, and they start a timer at the DMV, you know, or something.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Or they're you know, you don't want to be rude to people as it is, but then what if they have the power to potentially, you know, make your rudeness go viral? And we've seen that, right? We've seen people who were just rude to an outrageous manner, and that people used to get away with that, and now they're like, now you've gone, quote unquote, gone viral, and everybody, you know, you probably got fired from your job, and not to say they didn't necessarily deserve it. I can't speak to every one of them, but it's something that we didn't have to deal with in the past. We didn't have to deal with the question: am I going to become internet famous, over this, my crude remarks, or not picking up my dog's poop, or whatever it is, right? Like,
right.
You become, and that's, and not to keep bringing everything back to Traveller, but that's what we came to talk about. But the Traveller has a lot of availability for that, because everybody, all the species and races in Traveller, and I think there's a push away from calling them races lately. I think that Mongoose is starting to call them more like species,
Okay.
because the word race is kind of loaded, and so I think that in our society it's maybe prejudicing people. But you look at the Salamani, and that they're very racist, right? They're human supremacists. Well, they're not racist. All colors and creeds get along as long as they're
human
from Earth, right? Like, look, we can't be racist, because look at all these different. There's Chinese people on this ship, and there's Mongolian people on this ship, and there's African people on the ship, and there's European people, and we all get along. We all get along just fine. It's those people you need to be worried about. Those aliens you need to be worried about. They're the trouble. They're the problem, right? And then that, what's wrong with them? Well, they're Villani, and they're, that's not the same, right? And then there's the Jordani are almost like a kind of Maoist communism when you look at them, right? They're kind of like, everybody thinks the right thing, and everybody thinks the right, has the right kinds of thoughts. And you can go through all the races, and there's the species in Traveller, the major races, and there's something, you're kind of able to make a point about all of them. And the wide variety of human races is something I really write about a lot in the different short stories, and it doesn't really come with the Wagner Incident as much, but the different short stories with in the collection, I think all of them at some point deal with somebody who is one of the human minor races, and how they're different than the other people around them, and whether that's accepted or not. One of the stories involves 4 humans living on a ship together, and all 4 of them are different subspecies of human. So this one, there's an Ansarin, there's a Villani, there's a Salamani, and there's a Dintia, all living on all working together on the ship. And it's the little subtle differences in the way they interact with the world kind of adds to some of the comedy of that, right? So it's a bunch of, it's a diversity that you could kind of point out the diversity and laugh. Now, if I had that be, say, it was a Frenchman, a Russian, a Chinese person, a Jewish person on this ship, I would get in trouble. I would end up offending somebody, right? I would say, I would make a joke at their expense, and it would be like, well, you can't say that about my people. You can't say that about Chinese people, for example, or Russian people. You can't make that reference. But it's funny when we've separated it out and said, well, look,
when you make an allegory for it by using,
when you make an allegory,
right? Yeah,
it's an allegory, and it can still be. You can still hang that up and say, look, that's kind of funny. Whether that's
well, when you see your troubles in others, it's easier to go, oh, look at those silly people, and then maybe later on you're going, wait a minute, that was me in that story.
Right, exactly. Yes, like look at those intolerant idiots over there, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute. Or the intolerant Salamani, right? The Salamani are not quite the Nazis. Like, I say quite, because it's right there. I mean, it's like an undercurrent that it could go that way. When they take when they take Terra back, what happens? Right? Do they start? Are there camps, or their concentration camps, or what happens to the non-humans living on Terra now? Do they let them stay? Is it like, okay, we'll let you stay, but you have your own section to live in? These are possibilities, like District 9 or something, Right. These are distinct possibilities, right? So this is where it's a little too too close to home in some ways. And I think that when here's what's strange about this. When Mark Miller and Lauren Wiseman and everyone else at GDW was writing these aliens and these alien modules, were they thinking these things? I mean, surely with the Soleimani, they have the party, right? That's a sort of a communist overtone for the Soleimani,
Right.
but they're not very communist at all. They're a little bit more Nazi than communist.
Maybe fascist would be the better word.
They're sort of fascist, right? They're sort of fascists, right? And you get the idea that there's but they strangely tolerate a lot of diversity as long as you're Soleimani.
Right.
And they'll expand that definition of Soleimani to fit whatever is convenient. And that reminds me of Hitler and Aryanism, right? Like he could expand the definition of Aryans to include himself, even though he didn't quite fit the mold.
Right.
But when the GDW crew created these races years ago, were they thinking that, or were they just like, hey, this would be cool? And I think it's the latter. I think they're just like, hey, this would be cool. You know, let's do a dog race and a cat race and let's do like a lizard race, and then that'll be all cool. You know, and then what are the different kinds of humans? Like, well, these humans do this and these humans do that. Oh, that'd be kind of cool. And I don't think that was in
Planned
their
out
head
necessarily, or
it wasn't planned out. It was just it's our.
It kind of came out organically rather than planned out. Is that what you're trying to say?
It came out organically, and it came out from the way it was interpreted later, the way the fans handled it, the way different people wrote about those things. It's kind of like, you know, because I definitely had, like I said, I had the Traveller book. The Traveller book talks about the Soleimani and the Villani and the Zhidani, but it doesn't give any kind of explanation like, you know, the Soleimani are kind of racist and the Zhidani are kind of communist, sort of, but, you know, they're both two levels. They're on opposite sides of the Imperium, right? And they're the two different directions, right? One's the far left and one's the far right, and one of them is, they're both types of authoritarian oppression, and the Empire, theoretically the most authoritarian of all of them, is right in the middle.
But the Empire is the benevolent authoritarians.
It's the benevolent authoritarian, right? So there's no real there's no nod toward liberalism in that. But I think it's interesting that there's, you know, our empire is better than your empire, when you can see that right there.
Right.
And then the Kukri, of course, that's much later when they finally detailed the Kukri, and they're, you know, theoretically the most monolithic thing ever. But if you talk to like Jim Kundert, who I think knows more about the Kukri than anybody, he says they're not, right? I think he's got maybe the right idea, is that there's a lot more dissent than we know about that goes on with them.
I tasted meat and I liked it.
Yeah, maybe not quite that far, but not everybody's always happy with the guy who's in charge of the herd.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a second person. With the sequel to the Wagner Incident, I've kind of thought about maybe dealing with that with the Droyne, but I cannot squeeze it into the book. I have enough going on in that book right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought about, what if there's a Droyne who's, you know, not fully one caste or another, and that might be a little bit too, you know, let this be your last battlefield kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to pander either. So that's the other thing, is I want to make it so I'm not, you know, saying you don't want to be like, oh, I wrote about this because it's trendy.
Right.
One of the short stories, and if you could put this in there, one of the short stories in this short story collection kind of deals head on with the question of the what the Nazis would have called an Untermensch, right? It's a person who is somehow societally less than somebody else, right? He's the protagonist is somebody who has a social disability, call it, right? And I purposely never say what that social disability is. He's got something that he, as the narrator, you expect there's an answer, and he never really says whether the narrator's male or female either. But it's maybe that person is gay, maybe that person is transgender, maybe that person is a different race, maybe that person's a different species.
Yeah, you leave that for the reader to fill in with their imagination.
Right. So I there's no gendered words about this character, so you never know. There's no pronouns about this character, so you never know, is this because he's definitely attracted to women. This, I say he, but they are definitely attracted to women. Doesn't mean that that's acceptable for men to be attracted to women in the society they came from. Maybe it's only acceptable for men to be attracted to other men, or maybe
certain men to certain women.
Or certain women to certain women, right? Or maybe it's just poverty, right? Because clearly this person has lived in poverty, but this person claims to live in poverty because people like him, quote unquote, like him, and you can fill in the blank with whatever. I wasn't going to write a story about what it's like to be an African American in space, because I don't know. I've never been an African American, so I don't know.
But you've also never been to space.
I've also never been to space that you know of. I haven't, but I don't. I'm not going to write.
But I like that kind of. It's like we were talking about earlier about Mad Libs. The reader kind of Mad Libs their own experience into that space and imagines. Maybe they imagine themselves or a loved one, or in that position.
A short story is basically about intolerance without specifying which intolerance, and you can fill in the blank whichever intolerance bothers you the most or bothers you the least, or whatever is the most palatable for you to think, well, this person must be blah 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 blah, right? I mean, you can read it and be like, well, it's obviously talking about ghettoized Jewish people from the 1930s, or it could be talking about the experience of Japanese Americans, right? It could be talking about any of these things, or none of these things, or it could be talking about what it means to be gay or transgender, or you're just the wrong kind of people. Right. Whatever it is, whatever's wrong with this guy, he's the wrong kind of people.
He's the wrong kind of people for his society.
Right. So he's given a very lousy job, and they don't really care much about him. He's a prospector on a planetoid, and he's lives his life on this little planetoid, being told he's on clock or off clock, and the story is more about his fantasy life and trying to resolve his problems on that planetoid and on the world that he lives in. And conveniently, he doesn't have to deal with anybody else because he's the only person who lives. He's like the little prince living on this planetoid. So the opportunity to write that doesn't have to be a Traveller story, but I like making it a Traveller story because I like bringing things like that into Traveller. And so did Mark. I think that's when Mark wrote. That's what really attracted me back to it, and the idea of writing fiction for it was that Agent of the Imperium has a lot of. I don't want to say it's social commentary, because that's, again, making it sound like it's preachy. You can read into that a lot of different things, and I think many of them are maybe even things he didn't intend to put into it.
Do you have social medias and ways that people can follow you?
I don't have enough. I have. I'm active on Facebook, and you can find me there.
Do you have an author page, or
there's a few Matthew Kerwins? I don't.
Okay.
I probably should make one, shouldn't I?
It worked. Mine works for me.
I should do that. I really don't. You can find the Wagner Incident on DriveThruRPG, and you can find the Frozen Watch and the Wagner Incident both on DriveThruRPG, and you can find Wagner also on Amazon. Amazon will ship it for free, so if you want a print copy of it, you can have it, printed there and shipped for free. But I think you get maybe a slightly better deal because you get both the Kindle version and the print version if you order them from DriveThru.
Right. I noticed also on DriveThru they have a new feature. They've revamped their website, and they have a button for follow the author. So that
Oh,
could
really?
be a way. Yeah, that could be a way folks could follow you.
Oh, well, maybe I'll create yeah, let's just say I have a Facebook author page, and by May 1st, I'll have a Facebook author page, right? It can't be that hard that it's going to take me a month to figure out how to set it up, right?
No, it's easy. You just set up a page, and then you're the only one who can start new threads, but your followers can respond, and it's a good way to just start building up a community for yourself and a place to promote your stuff where nobody's going to complain that you're spamming.
Is that your Cyborg Prime?
Yeah, that's my Cyborg Prime on
That's
Facebook.
an author. Okay, yeah. Because I was thinking, I don't think we're friends on Facebook, but I keep seeing your posts, and I'm trying to figure out how do I see his posts. I did not do any research on how to do this, by the way. I am not good at self-promotion. I am not good at marketing. Not good at any of that stuff.
Right. Well, you join the groups, and then you don't spam them. You just wait for the topic to come up, and then you plug your. People are like, no, I can't find any deck plans, and I go, here's some, or stuff like that. So I post stuff on my own wall, and I try not to spam it because people are getting notifications. They don't need to get 20 notifications from me a day, but one every other day keeps you in mind. And if it's stuff engaging with your community, it's worth it. You actually start making friends and meeting other cool people, like what's happening here, and networking, and pretty soon people are offering to help you, or on my Discord group, I bounce ideas off of. I have like an advisory committee. They're always online, and I can go, hey, what do you guys think of this? Or is this too corny? Or here's a funny thing that spit out of my AI generator or whatever. And so I can get pretty instantaneous feedback from pretty much the target audience, because who follows you? Your target audience.
We could talk about that, because I am obviously on Discord, but I'm just Matthew Kerwin, all one word, on Discord. I don't even have like an email address set up for writing inquiries or anything like that. I just use my regular email, which is probably not a great idea, didn't really think this through.
Well, you could be Arcane Fortress at Google, or
Arcanic Fortress, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, Arcanic Fortress.
The funny thing about Arcanic Fortress, I had just written the short story Arcanic and I was not expecting Drive-Thru to ask me for a name of a publishing company when I self-published.
Right.
And like Amazon didn't ask, but Drive-Thru asked me for a name of a publishing company. It wouldn't take my name, so I made up the name Arcanic Fortress Publishing, and I just typed it in there, and boom, there I am. So I actually have not incorporated that or anything, or made any kind of an LLC or anything.
Right.
It's just a name that's a placeholder, and I can change it, I guess, whenever I want, if I wanted
to. Depending on how much you're married to it, or importance it is to you, you could make your. I just use CyborgPrime Games or CyborgPrime Publishing, because my online handle for a lot of the forums that I used to be on, moderating and stuff, and just carried that over because I had a little bit of notoriety, and so I wanted to carry those 7 followers over.
7 followers, yeah.
But 7 followers, then 2 more, and then 5 more, and then 1 more, and it just builds and builds, over time.
That's part of the thing too. Like on Facebook, I'm getting friend requests from fans who've read the book, which is great. By the way, that is the most awesome thing ever.
Right.
But do I really want these people reading about
Well, see, that's the thing. That's why you should have an author page, because people are going to want to be friends with you, but I tell people politely that I only friend people I actually know in real life. If you want to follow my projects, go over to here.
And I'm not super picky about that. I'm not posting anything really detailed and personal on Facebook anymore. But I think that it is I get a gateway into their views on things, and some of them are quite disturbing. So I don't know that if you write
I have friends whose feeds I have to turn off because they enrage me.
Yeah,
I can imagine like strangers.
Oh my gosh! If you find yourself writing sci-fi military fiction, you definitely get a lot of very right-wing people who start following you.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't hate that. I just, some of it's a little, I do turn off.
It starts coming into your feed.
And you start
getting like survival food and like, weird stuff.
Yeah. My algorithm starts changing. So now it thinks that it wants me to talk about Trump every day. And I don't. And so I think that that's a big piece of why I probably should do this author page situation. I should make that more official. So yeah, look for my Facebook author page. It'll be coming out shortly. I do have a web space too. I have travellerfiction.com and travellerfiction.net.
Oh, those are great names.
I've been sitting on them for a while, and I kind of told Mark about that and asked him, hey, if you ever want these names, I'll give them to you. And he never responded to me, which is kind of how most of our conversations go. But I'm assuming that means he doesn't want it.
He's busy and not tied to his computer because he's the different generation from us.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But it is still out there. So I've kind of never done anything with it. And with the, as we talked about, some of this stuff is up in the air right now where I'll be able to publish more. And so I'm going to wait and see if I have that ability. If I get the ability to get another second and third book out, I think I will start using that page just as a promotional. My current system of promotion is I hang out and I lurk in the Facebook Traveller groups until somebody asks if anyone's written any Traveller fiction.
That's perfect.
And then I post a link to mine with some self-deprecating comment about this guy sucks, but you could read his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll find that a bunch of people start reading that. And strangely, I would think that by now everyone's heard that I wrote the Wagner Incident. That is not the case, because all of a sudden then I'll have a little spike, right? I've sold no books for the last 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I just sold 22 books today. It's like, oh, because I posted on Facebook about, that'll...
Right. And don't forget, all the groups that you belong to are constantly growing. And so that's always adding in new people who possibly haven't heard of you.
Yeah, but I mean, with Traveller players, they're dying of old age too on the other end. But yeah, there's just as many as there ever were. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and I use Discord the same way you do. I have this group of people who I'm friends with on Discord, or Traveller players. Rob's one of them. Joshua Bell. Tom, who runs the wiki, and I bounce ideas off them, and they bounce ideas off me, and we collaborate on several things. And I've gotten after collaborating with Chris Griffin on several things, I actually got a couple of thank you credits on Mongoose products because of that. I got thank you on the Third Imperium book because he'd been bouncing ideas off of me on that one. So there's a little bit of a community there, but Discord itself kind of sucks in a lot of ways. It's very hard to try to read a long-term thread. The conversations are kind of ephemeral, right? I don't know if you've noticed. I'm sure you've noticed that, Rogue. You have your own Discord stuff going on.
You can make threads though. You can break things off into sidebar threads, but a lot of folks don't know how to use them, or how to start one. And
yeah, we talked about doing that, and I it's good for a conversation between two people taking place in real time or close to it, but it's not good to be like, what did you say 3 weeks ago about this? And that is not super convenient.
Right.
So there's positives and negatives to that, but yeah, you can.
It kind of makes it like a forum because you have threads and you can search them. The searcher on Discord works really good. It'll go back and tell you what channels and everything the thing was in that you typed. You could search for people. You're like, Chris posted something about a Vargar, and you can just type Vargar, and it'll show you Chris posted something about Vargar 2 weeks ago, and you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, if you remember one of the keywords or something, I guess
right.
that is more. It's just it's probably just newfangled, and I'm old and I don't know how to use it right. It's the same thing from every generation, right? I learned how to use Facebook, and so I'm sort of stuck on Facebook because that's posting stuff about fiction doesn't really work on Instagram, so I never really got into Instagram as far as that goes.
Sure.
And then I could post a comment on Discord, hey, go check out my my novel, but then I also don't want to spam that. I think I posted once or twice about it, but I don't want to spam it through in the Traveller Discord groups and be like known as that guy who constantly spamming about some book he wrote.
Right.
Um,
well, after you get a couple of things like in your catalog, ask the guys on the Traveller Discord to make you a publisher channel.
Oh, okay.
That, you know, I don't get a lot of hits through there, but I get some. And so all the publishers have their own little channel, and you can just post what you want in there. Spam it all you want because you're not spamming outside of your own channel. And
if you've chosen to subscribe to the channel, you're going to get that spam. And if you chose to unsubscribe, it goes away. Yeah, that's good news. That'd be good. Yeah, I've had to mute a lot of. I probably muted most of the Discord channels I'm in, which is
yeah. I muted all the Discords I'm in, and I only have it set up for if I'm mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I think I have that. Actually, I think I do have that too. If you mention my name directly, but then at everyone seems to get that too.
At everyone does that too. Yeah, so that's a pain.
Super annoying.
Right, but you can just right click on the server and do mark as read, and you don't have to.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, there's ways to use it. I'm just not very good at it.
Well, they're not obvious, you know. I just find out about it because I like really use it a lot, and I tinker with things, and I'm like, ooh, you can make bots. How do you make bots? Oh, you can do this. How do you do that? So
right.
Yeah, that's the only reason I know more than the next guy.
The voice end of it seems to work really well. I have no problems with it, no trouble, as we're obviously doing right now.
Yeah, it's coming through crystal clear. It works great.
And that's so much better than it was. You know, I remember back in the EQ days would you be on trying to use Ventrilo? Did you?
Oh yeah. I used to use Ventrilo.
And the conversations would be
not Ventrilo, TeamSpeak.
TeamSpeak, yes, yeah. And they had both of them at various times, but yeah, I would be like, and you'd lose people in the middle of the raid. And, oh my gosh, yeah. So like. They've nailed that part of it for sure.
Right.
It's just a different. The information's being thrown up in a different way, and I'm not used to it.
Right. So let's see. The best place to get your stuff then would be drive-through.
Yeah, you can find me on drive-through.
Oh no, we just covered that. Drive-through and Amazon. Okay.
Drive-through and Amazon. You can get the novel on Amazon. You can get the short story that Mongoose published. That was the Frozen Watch. You can get that from drive-through.
All right.
I think you can get that on Mongoose's webpage too, but I think they seem to be just fine with everybody using drive-through. Well, I loved also, I love to hear from readers. So if you want to reach out to me on any of those any of those places and just tell me you read the book and just tell me what you think of it, like, I would love to hear about it.
That's cool. Yeah, buyers can leave comments at drive-through, and then they can also find you on Facebook.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I actually have no reviews on drive-through for the Wagner Incident, though I've sold a great number of copies there. Not like thousands, but I've sold a lot, and it seems like everybody who's talked to me about it has said that they can't leave reviews for me. I asked. I wrote to drive-through support and asked them why people can't write reviews for me, and they said they can. So I've never figured that out. I have lots of Amazon reviews that are all good, for the most part.
Well, so you got one somewhere because you have a 4-star review.
Yeah, I mean, I can get stars, but no actual reviews written down.
I see.
Like there's someone makes comments and says they're making comments because they can't write a review.
Right, I see that in the discussion. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it's not a the first one's kind of funny. He's like, well, why didn't you write this about Vargar instead? Like, okay, thanks, man. I'll get right on that. And then the other guy, like Robert, writes this whole thing, and it's like, that's kind of nice, but like no one actually seems to be able to write a review.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true though.
They're working out because they have a banner ad system that's not working, so they're still trying to they're still working out the wrinkles on their new system.
Yeah,
and that might be part of it.
Do you sell on Amazon at
all? Yes.
Because did you ever use the Amazon advertising?
No.
Yeah, I tried that. I spent a staggeringly small amount of money on it, and it is not. I think I got some sales out of it, but it's really kind of hard to pin it down. Like you would think it tells you, like it brings it up as an ad for people who are interested in certain things, right? You put keywords and if they're searching through those things, it'll suggest the novel. Because I kind of think that this is I kind of want this book to go past Traveller. I want it to be, it sounds egotistical to say this. I want it to be an ambassador for Traveller. I want people to read this and then get interested in Traveller.
Sure.
And I think Mark's book is the same way. I think you can read that without knowing anything about Traveller.
Yeah, it's standalone.
It's a standalone.
It has Easter eggs. If you're, I did read part of it, so
yeah.
You'll recognize Traveller stuff if you play Traveller, and if you don't play Traveller, you'll learn about Traveller stuff.
And it's a very,
without realizing it.
It broadly works as his broadly works as a sci-fi novel, and I like to think mine narrowly works as a sci-fi novel, right? It works if you read into it, and I think I've explained you don't need to know anything. So I did post it as like a science fiction book and just with various keywords, and it would tell me that people had clicked on the keywords, but it wouldn't tell me if anyone had ever bought the book as a result of those.
No, you don't get the conversion numbers.
And what was strange is I also never really understood how it was billing me, but it was never very much money. It was in the neighborhood of less than $10 for whenever I'd start a campaign. It would be less than $10 worth because it would only bill me for however many times it actually shows the ad or something. And I wasn't really quite clear why I wouldn't just show it more to get more money.
Maybe the audience designated was too narrow.
Could be. Or not just not enough links or not enough clicks, but
yeah,
it was as I said, it was a foray of if I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this, if this was like my main gig, I think I'd spend more time on it and try to actually earn some money on this. But my goal with this is not really to get rich. I feel like I'm honing a craft on the writing. Something I've like always wanted to do, but never had anything I felt was good enough to try to publish it. And the way you publish things now is almost exclusively through self-publishing. You can still get an agent and try to get something, published the long way, but I feel like to do that, I have to have a deeper level of skill.
Yeah, I think so. All right, man. Well, thank you for coming to the Mayday, and thank you for being so gracious as to provide a interview. It's good to get to know the other people in the community, and I've enjoyed our chat and getting to know you a little bit. So thanks a lot for dropping by.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I've been doing.
Awesome. Well, this is CyborgPrime, known also as Frank Succardi, or maybe that's the other way around. And I'm here. Been having a great chat with my friend Matthew Kerwin, who is the author of the Wagner Incident and the Cold Watch and a few other goodies that you should look out for in the future. And once again, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, dear listener. Until next time, happy traveling. Don't fly solo through the galaxy. Click like to join our alliance. Subscribe for your crew pass and enable notifications to never miss an encounter. This journey is fueled by my patrons. Thank you, patrons. Feel the thrill of discovery. Become a patron and join the adventure.